Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive?
Always.
So today we're doing something a little different. We're going visual.
Ah,
Yeah, we're diving into the work of Karl Mortier, a visual storyteller who, well, he basically sketched out the happiness at work event.
that's so cool. You know I'm a visual learner, so this is right up my alley.
Me too, actually. And, this event was all about, getting businesses ready for the next generation.
Yeah. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, all that.
Exactly. So we're going to, unpack these visuals together, see what insights we can pull out. What do you say?
Sounds fascinating. Plus, I always love seeing how different people interpret the same event. Like what details jump out at them.
Right. Okay, so before we even jump into the keynote speakers, there was this really interesting presentation by Gina Earthiva.
Ah, yes. She really set the tone for the whole day, didn't she?
You told me she used sensory experiences and movement to shift everyone's focus towards intuition.
Absolutely. It was
Yeah.
like she cleared the mental clutter and made room for a different way of thinking.
So she's basically saying we need to rely more on our gut feelings instead of just logic and data all the time.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there's more to decision-making than just what we can analyze.
That makes sense. I mean, have you ever had a feeling about something that turned out to be right, even though you couldn't explain it?
All the time. I think we all have, right?
Right. So Earthiva's arguing we need to tap into that inner wisdom more.
Yes, and her presentation really set the stage for the other speakers who explored how this idea of intuition plays out in the modern workplace.
This is already making me rethink how I work.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the first keynote, Julien De Wit. He was talking about Generation Z, right? And how they fit into the workplace.
Yes, and Carl's visuals for DeWitt's talk were really striking.
Okay, what jumped out at you?
Well, the first thing was this funnel overflowing with 58 gigabytes of data.
58 gigabit, what does that even...
DeWitt was illustrating how much information Gen Z processes daily. Imagine drinking from a fire hose. That's what it's like.
No wonder they feel overwhelmed, constantly in crisis mode.
Right. And this constant information overload leads to stress and difficulty making decisions. So as a manager or a coworker, you have to simplify. Simplify everything.
Yeah, just give them the essentials. Don't overload them.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the information overload. What else did Carl capture?
Well, right next to that overwhelming data funnel, he drew two figures. They were engaged in active listening.
Oh, I see. So it's not enough to just hear them. You have to really listen, understand.
Precisely. Gen Z really craves understanding. They want to feel seen, heard, and it makes you wonder, are we really present in our conversations?
That's a good point. I know I'm guilty of half listening sometimes, especially when I'm busy.
We all are. It's a challenge for everyone. And it makes you wonder if we sometimes dismiss Gen Z's concerns because we're not taking the time to understand.
Okay, so we've got data overload, a need for understanding. What else?
Well, there's this interesting image of a puzzle. DeWitt used it to represent Gen Z's struggle with identity.
Oh, that's so true. They're bombarded with so many messages, expectations. It's hard to figure out who you are in all of that.
Exactly. And social media adds another layer because there's this pressure to present a perfect image online.
It's like they're trying to piece together their identity, but they don't have all the pieces. And then they compare themselves to these idealized versions of other people.
It's a tough landscape to navigate for sure.
Okay, so information overload, a craving for understanding, and an ongoing struggle with identity. What else?
Now, remember those stereotypes about Gen Z? Lazy, demanding, obsessed with work-life balance. Carl drew all these labels and then put a giant no PE across them.
Like he's saying, don't believe everything you hear.
Exactly. DeWitt's point was that these are just stereotypes. They don't reflect the reality of Gen Z.
So what's the reality then?
What they really want is meaningful work. And they're willing to put in the effort if they feel like they're making a difference. It's not about laziness, it's about purpose.
And that brings us to the visual of the person climbing a mountain.
Yes. DeWitt used that to symbolize Gen Z's ambition, their desire for growth. They want to make a mark on the world.
It's not about a cushy job with perks. They want to be challenged, contribute something.
Right. They want to feel like their work matters.
And honestly, a lot of these insights about Gen Z apply to all of us, don't they? I mean, we all crave meaning and connection in our work.
You're so right. These visuals, they don't just help us understand Gen Z, they make us reflect on ourselves too.
Absolutely. Before we move on, what resonated most with you from DeWitt's perspective? Anything challenge your own views on Gen Z?
What really struck me was the emphasis on authenticity. Gen Z can spot a fake from a mile away. They want leaders and coworkers who are genuine, and I think that's a valuable reminder for all of us.
It's funny you mention authenticity because that leads perfectly into our next speaker,
Oh, yeah.
Eva Storm. She focused on Generation Alpha.
The generation after Gen Z.
That's the one. And guess what Karl sketched to represent them? A figure standing confidently on top of the world. Wow, okay, so they're going to be running the world someday. What's so special about their leadership style?
Well, Storm highlighted the importance of intuition.
Ah, there it is again.
Yeah.
That intuition thread from Gina Eartheva's presentation.
Right. So it's not just Gen Z that needs to embrace intuition. It's the up-and-coming generation of leaders, too. What else did she say about Gen Alpha?
I'm all ears.
Okay, so she emphasized that they're not going to be bound by traditional career paths. In fact, Karl drew a doctor.
A doctor.
Yeah, but get this, holding a bouquet of flowers.
Okay, that's not something you see every day. A doctor with flowers, what's that all about?
It's meant to challenge our assumptions about professions. Storm was saying that Gen Alpha might not follow that typical, education then career path. They're more likely to follow their passions, even if it's unconventional.
I like that. Finding work that aligns with your values, even if it doesn't fit the mold, that's encouraging.
It's about trusting your intuition, forging your own path.
Love it. But let's be real, Gen Alpha grew up surrounded by tech. How does that play into it?
Storm addressed that. Karl captured it with two phrases: disconnection through technology and digital path.
So tech can both disconnect and connect.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
It can lead to isolation, but also opens up new possibilities for connection. Storm's point was about finding balance between logic and intuition in this digital world.
So not rejecting tech, but using it mindfully.
Yes. And that leads to the next visual, a figure with a big heart emphasizing listening and connection.
Makes you think, how often are we really present in conversation?
Right. Are we listening to understand or just waiting to talk?
Deep. And Storm took it a step further with intuition. Karl actually sketched intuition over ratio.
She was saying we need to trust our gut feelings more, especially in this fast-changing world.
Not abandoning logic, but finding that balance.
Precisely. And this brings us to the CARE principle. Karl visualized it as 4 interconnected elements.
Okay, let's hear it.
Connect, authentic, respect, empower.
Catchy. What's the meaning behind it?
So, Storm argued that these should be the foundation of how we interact, both personally and professionally. Imagine a workplace where everyone felt connected, respected, empowered.
That sounds pretty utopian.
Right. But it starts with each of us choosing to embody these principles.
Okay, I like that. What else from Karl's notes?
Oh, one last thing. Karl sketched a figure with open arms. It represented Storm's message about embracing imperfection.
Letting go of the need for control.
Yes. And the fear of failure. Embracing imperfection is crucial for growth, for authenticity.
It's okay to not be perfect.
Exactly. It ties back to what we were saying about Gen Z and their struggles with identity. Maybe if we all embrace imperfection more, there'd be less pressure to present this perfect image.
I think you're right. So much freedom in letting go of that. So we've got Gen Z craving authenticity and understanding, Gen Alpha following intuition and embracing imperfection. How does our final speaker, Jef Staes, fit into this?
Oh, get ready for a call to action. Stace was all about shaking things up, and Karl's visuals captured that energy perfectly. He started with an image of a person trapped in diplomas and rigid structures.
Pat.
Yeah, like suffocating. Stace argued we're stuck in a 2D world where systems and qualifications stifle talent and passion. We value the paper more than the person's abilities.
That's so true. You see it all the time.
Yeah.
Someone's brilliant but doesn't have the right degree.
Exactly. And Stace says we need to move beyond that, embrace a 3D world.
A 3D world.
A world where talent, passion, experience are valued most. Karl sketched it as a vibrant space full of creativity.
So people can tap into their strengths, passions.
Yes, it leads to more engagement, productivity, fulfillment. It's a win-win.
But how do we get there? So many workplaces are still stuck in the 2D mindset.
Stace says it requires a shift in how we think about work. Stop seeing it as just a means to an end. See it as an opportunity for self-expression, growth, making a difference. He called it passion suffering.
Passion suffering sounds a bit,
It's not suffering in a negative sense. It's about recognizing that pursuing your true calling comes with challenges.
so embracing the whole journey.
Yes, and organizations need to support this. Create a culture that encourages passion-driven work, empower people to take risks, experiment, learn from failures.
I like that. Creating a space for people to be themselves, pursue their passions.
Right. And that ties into another concept, disrupting the status quo. Karl put disrupt right in the center of the sketch.
Be the change you want to see.
Exactly. And Staes emphasized placing the right people in the right place. Move away from rigid hierarchies, create a more fluid environment.
Recognizing that talent doesn't always fit neatly into boxes.
Absolutely. And then there's the consequences of not making these changes. Karl sketched burnout, bore out, demotivation.
It's like a warning, right?
Yes, suppressing talent and passion has consequences, both for individuals and organizations. And Staes went even further, highlighting the power defect.
The power defect. What's that?
Incompetent leadership that stifles innovation. People in power who are more concerned with control than growth. Karl drew a big game over sign next to it.
Clinging to the old ways even when it's not working.
Yeah. Afraid of losing control, they stifle creativity, and ultimately that leads to decline.
So what's the alternative?
Staes advocated for real competence development. Karl showed it as a pathway to progress, prioritizing experience, passion, talent over qualifications.
So learning and development happen outside the classroom too?
Exactly. Creating opportunities for people to grow through real-world experiences. It's about empowering individuals.
Like, don't wait for permission, go create your own opportunity.
Exactly. And organizations need to provide resources, support, flexibility.
Wow. Staes really gave us a lot to think about. It's a call to action for all of us. Rethinking our relationship with work, embracing passions, creating a better environment.
And Karl Mortier's visuals really brought it to life.
Absolutely. So, dear listeners, we've explored 3 inspiring keynotes, each with a unique perspective on the future of work. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Jef Staes.
And Karl Mortier's visuals, they didn't just let us hear these ideas, but see them, feel them.
It's been a journey through visual storytelling. Before we wrap up, what resonated most with you throughout this deep dive? What are you taking away from this?
It's fascinating how each speaker emphasized authenticity, connection, meaning in the workplace. Whether it's understanding Gen Z, embracing Gen Alpha's intuition, or unleashing talent with Jef Staes, we need to create a work environment where individuals can thrive.
It's amazing, isn't it? How much we can glean from just a few sketches.
It really is. Like, Karl Mortier has this gift for distilling complex ideas into these really powerful, striking images.
I bet you can still picture that overflowing data funnel.
Oh, absolutely. Or that person trapped, amidst all those diplomas.
They're really memorable, aren't they? It's like he's created this visual language for these big, important concepts.
That's a great way to put it, a visual language.
And speaking of big concepts, we've talked so much about intuition in this deep dive. It was like a thread through all the speakers.
You notice that too. It's like Gina Orthiva planted that seed with her presentation, and it just kept growing, as we heard from each speaker.
Right. Like De Wit talking about understanding Gen Z on a deeper level, Storm emphasizing trusting your gut. Even Staes was doing his emphasis on logic, talking about passion. All of that connects back to intuition somehow, right?
Absolutely. It's like this undercurrent, flowing beneath all these ideas, that ability to tap into a deeper understanding beyond just logic.
And we've all had those moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where something just clicks, you know it's right, even if you can't explain why.
Oh, yeah, those aha moments. But the question is, how do we cultivate that? Can you learn intuition, or are some people just born with it?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I think it's a bit of both. We all have that inner voice, but it gets drowned out so easily.
By the noise of life.
Exactly. To-do lists, schedules, we forget to listen to that quieter wisdom.
So maybe it's about creating space, silence, to hear it.
Yeah, hitting pause on all the external noise, tuning in.
And maybe paying attention to our dreams. Sometimes those strange images hold meaning, right?
I think so. It's like our intuition speaking in a different language.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I'm feeling inspired to pay more attention to my own intuition. And it all ties back to that happiness at work theme, doesn't it?
It does. It's not just about a job. It's about finding work that aligns with your values, your passions, and yes, your intuition.
Finding that sweet spot where your talents meet the needs of the world.
And I think intuition can guide us there.
So to all our listeners, trust your gut, follow your heart, even when it leads you off the beaten path. And if you ever get a chance to see Karl Mortier's work,
do it. It's a feast for the mind.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.
Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.